Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Disability Smart webinar with a focus on technology, part of our series we've been running on our Disability Smart framework, which is generously supported by our friends at Unilever. Let me introduce myself. Everyone, welcome. I am Lucy Ruck. I'm the Task Force Manager at Business Disability Forum. I always end up putting this slide in, otherwise I just rattle on and forget to introduce myself. So that's me. But you don't just have to listen to me today. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-hosts. I've got Kathy Steed from Unilever, Darren Rowan from Eli Lilly, Denise Wood from PwC, and Sarah John from NatWaste. And you'll hear from them a little later on. So let me tell you a little bit about the Technology Task Force. So the Technology Task Force is about organisations working together to make technology accessible for everyone. That kind of sums it up. But I'm just going to explain a little bit more detail about sort of how we came about and what we do. So we launched back in 2008. So we've been around for a little while now. And the reason we came together as a group is there is a kind of feeling that technology should be the answer to all the issues and problems that we face. And what we actually found was technology was often becoming the barrier to organisations. So we pulled together a group of our partner organisations at BDF and created the Technology Task Force. And being a kind of action-orientated group that they are, they decided they wanted to create some tools and resources. So we created the Accessible Technology Charter and the Accessibility Maturity Model. I'm going to talk you through that in a little while. So that's who we are a little bit in what we do. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to Darren from Eli Lilly, who's, rather than me telling you why accessibility matters to business, we're going to go to a business and they're going to tell us why it's important to them. So over to you, Darren.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, everyone. As Lucy said, I'm Darren Rowan. I work for Eli Lilly and Company as a program manager. What I really want to talk about then is why accessibility matters and why it matters to all of us as businesses, not just at Eli Lilly and Company. There are multiple reasons why accessibility matters. First of all, from an inclusion perspective, if we look at the world's population, we know that at least 15% of that population has a disability. And in fact, that's regarded as being quite a conservative number these days. We quite often hear, as we talk in many countries and the developed countries especially, that it's more like 1 in 5 and maybe more that have a disability. And then when we look at that as it impacts the family and friends, you know, we then start to think about could be over sort of 50% of the population. I think the Valuable 500 put it at something like 54% of the population being impacted. It's a huge amount of people, and actually there's a lot of money that goes with that. So from a business perspective, you wouldn't want to miss out on that type of demographic. And the amount of money that we're talking here is said to be up to $13 trillion, which is a huge amount. So quite often we say that disabilities are the largest minority group in the world that anybody can join at any time. So it's a huge market to consider, and also from the inclusion perspective, first and foremost, it's really important to bear that in mind. But we also know that having diverse workforces makes you more profitable as a business and more innovative as a business, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But a recent report from Accenture said actually diverse companies are up to 4 times more profitable as a business. Historically, there have been many inventions then that have been, first of all, designed and created specifically for people with disabilities. I guess some of the obvious ones could be around closed captions. Obviously, many of us use today on the TV and many of the calls like the one that we're on today. But also things like the typewriter that later became the keyboard was invented for a blind person. Text messaging was also invented for deaf, and who hasn't used a text message in the last couple of decades? But then when we think about physical innovations, the obvious ones are those designed for wheelchairs initially, like ramps and curb cuts, etc., that become, beneficial to so many people in making mobility easier, regardless of whether you have a disability or not. And one of the other ones is the bendy straw that we like to point out was created by a father for his disabled daughter whilst in hospital to help with drinking. And actually it's still very much in use today in hospitals. So when we think of those things that were designed specifically for disabled people, and then they became mainstream use and opportunities as well. Also, your workforce needs to reflect the market that you serve. And clearly, as we stated already, that we know that we're all different, and disability is one of those dimensions of difference that we need to be considering. So we need to make sure that we're accessible in our company, and we need to make sure that we're thinking about workplace adjustments where we haven't already managed to design for all those features that most people be able to take advantage of. So you need to be proactive around how you are making accessibility as part of what you do, but also you need to be mindful of those workplace adjustments. In the US, the Job Accommodation Network, they found that 72% of workplace adjustments, or 72% of people who'd had workplace adjustments were said to be more productive than ever before. And also there's always this myth around workplace adjustments, and aren't they too expensive? Microlink have done some research around this as well. And the average cost in the UK was said to be around £650. So really not that expensive at all when you think, and many of those can be even less than that, or even free if they come down to more workplace arrangements. And then finally, I suppose, from research done from the BDF themselves on their great big workplace adjustments survey in the last couple of years, 42% of respondents I found that they'd acquired their or had an adjustment because they'd acquired their disability during their working life. And I think what this really hammers home, and back to my comment earlier about, you can unfortunately join this community at any time, due to circumstances, and therefore you need to often consider that, whilst people are working for you today, and that can change in their circumstances, and as we get older, then that becomes more likely. So you need to kind of remember it's not a case of us and them, but really thinking of us as one large community here. I think that the final piece to mention, and we don't tend to talk as much about this in the task force because it's all about what can we do to be innovative and inclusive, but of course compliance is really important to remember as well. The laws for disability inclusion and accessibility are quite rightly tightening around the world, and there are various standards that you need to adhere to if you're going to be serious about this. But I think most importantly, to build this into what you do earlier will mean that it saves you money and a lot more issues and potential litigation in the wrong run. And it's even estimated by DQ, who did some research, that it could cost you up to 100 times more expensive if you don't build this in. So if what I told you before were the carrots for accessibility, I guess this last one is really the stick. So yeah, there's some of the things to think about when considering why does accessibility matter. Lucy?
Making accessibility your business. Have you ever felt that you need to adapt to the environment because the environment is not adapted for you? Have you ever felt like you don't quite fit in Have you ever felt that you're not understood? This is how it feels for the many millions of people living with disabilities every day. And the same is true in the digital world. Did you know that over 15% of the world's population have a disability? And that the total spending power of the disability community is estimated at $13 trillion every year. The good news is prioritizing accessibility and disability inclusion will not only win and keep your customers, it will help your business rise above the competition. We have broken down the benefits into 5 key areas. Innovation. A diverse workforce boasts a wider array of skills, strengths, and ideas. With diverse ideas come new opportunities for your business to succeed. Inclusion. Inclusive design leaves no one behind. Diverse workforces reflect the needs of diverse customer bases. Inclusive design ensures that places, experiences, and products are open to all, regardless of age, disability, and background. Brand. An inclusive brand outperforms its competition. Brand accessibility ensures your brand is responsive and relevant to all. Customers today want to do business with compassionate organizations that put their customers' needs before profit. Productivity. Accessible solutions boosts productivity for everyone. They're easier to navigate, intuitive, simpler. Organizations that are focused on accessibility are 4 times more likely to see returns that outperform the competition. Compliance. By raising the bar on compliance, you're reducing the risk to your organization. The law is strengthening for people with disabilities around the world. Being classed as inaccessible will cost you time and money in dealing with the complaints and negatively impact your brand. Disability is the only minority group that anyone can join at any time. It knows no barriers. To find out more about the free resources available around accessibility, visit businessdisabilityforum.org.uk. Brought to you by Microlink in partnership with Business Disability Forum's Technology Task Force.
Apologies, I was slightly out of sync there. So that video is a nice summary of something that we put together called the Accessibility Business Case, which effectively is a landing page on the BDF website that the link's already been shared in the chat. What you saw earlier with some of the slides I was sharing, that is also part of the content. So what we've done is we've provided a set of slides, we've provided a full document, and done a fair amount of research into terms of sources that were already out there and included those as links as part of the overall business case website and document itself. And then this was the final piece that you just saw, the video, which I think is a nice way of summarizing it all up and hopefully pointing you to those resources again. The piece that I really like about it is that, there's accessible imagery in here, as well as it's obviously got captions built in, and as was said on the chat as well, there's also an audio described version of this. So yeah, we're really proud of what we've delivered, and we'd just love to hear from others and see hopefully how you can use it.
Making accessibility your business.
Started playing again. I was worried it wouldn't play at all, and I could have played it 3 times now. Thank you for that, Darren.
It's okay.
Really useful. And again, I think we've got signposts in the chat to where to find and access that information. Apologies, I think I got slightly out of sync as you were presenting there as well. So, but it just proves it's live, doesn't it?
Yep.
I'm going to move on now to talk to you a little bit about the accessibility maturity model. So Darren touched very much on the why we need to do this, the business case, the why it's important. I'm going to do a little bit more about the drilling down and how you figure out what you need to focus on. So I touched on earlier on that the Tech Task Force created the accessibility maturity model, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it is and what does it aim to do, because I think that's really important. There's something incredibly important about knowing what does good look like. What things do I need to be thinking about when thinking about digital accessibility? And that's what this does. It's a self-assessment tool. It's a framework for you to use and to make sure that you're thinking about all aspects around digital accessibility. It was also developed by a range of organisations to work for everyone. So you'll be pleased to know I didn't sit in a room by myself and design and develop this. This is developed by organisations from government agencies, from banks to supermarkets, to energy companies, to software companies who've been in help to design this in the first place. And I think we've gone through about 4 iterations of it. So we've revised it and continue to revise it to make sure it still works for a wide group of people and that it's clear and easy to use. It is also free, which is always nice. We like a freebie. So it's a free resource developed by world leaders in accessibility. So I'm now going to show you what it looks like. Do not worry, you do not have to read what is on screen. What I'm going to do is it's useful for you to have a visual picture if that helps you, and I will describe what this looks like. So we call it the AMM because the accessibility maturity model is a little bit of a mouthful. These are the first 5 points. There's another 5 points on the next slide, which I will come to in a moment. What you have is you have 5 levels of maturity, which is why it's called a maturity model. So level 1 is quite informal. So you might have no documentation or processes in place. Level 2 is then defined. It's documented, but not actioned or only completed once. Level 3 is repeatable. So process is established and actioned consistently. Level 4 is managed. So process is monitored and improved, and it becomes part of your business as usual. And level 5, best practice, you innovate and improve and you share. What we've then got is, if you think of it as a grid, you've got a lot of bullet points in there, and they're your prompts. So if you're hitting these bullet points, then you're doing something around that. What I also think of it as a little bit is a bit of a cheat sheet. So if you're already at level 2 and you want to know what do I need to do to get to level 3 or 4, it's giving you the guidance on the things you need to be thinking about to be able to move up to that next level. And this covers a number of areas within the technology space. So things like having commitment, having a senior champion in place. We all know, and we say this across the board at BDF, you've got someone senior saying that this is important to you and your organization. It's going to be a lot easier for you to get stuff done. Things around disability awareness, consultation with staff and colleagues to make sure they're involved in the processes, making sure you're able to access the built-in accessibility that comes with so many pieces of software and apps these days. Things like workplace adjustments, obviously that has a tech element quite often. I'm just going to move on to the next slide as well. So again, you've got the same levels of maturity, but we're looking at things like accessibility know-how. How do you know your colleagues within tech have got the right knowledge and skills to support people? Benchmarking, so how do you know how you're doing? Development life cycle, procurement and supply partners, and then that continuous improvement piece. So some of these will be very familiar to you in the tech space, but this, so I'm not going through every bullet point, that would take the whole 45 minutes, but you can see how it's almost telling you where you would fit depending on how you do. Now you can give yourself half scores in this, so you don't have to fit entirely neatly in a box. Because if you're doing some in level 3 and some in level 4, you might go level 3.5. So you decide where you fit. What I also wanted to share was that the Tech Task Force have been doing these scores now. Beginning of the calendar year, we sit them down and we ask them to give us their scores. Now, of course, they're confidential, so we don't share individual organisations' scores, but it's incredibly useful for us to look for patterns. What I think is quite interesting is not always do scores go up. Scores can go down year on year, depending on different things. And it's incredibly complex to understand and to pick this out. But as an average across the board, people are scoring somewhere around 2.5. And this is useful because if you just do this for the first time and you're scoring 1s and 2s, don't beat yourself up about it. Everyone else has been there. I just always think that's quite reassuring for people. And focusing on this year's scores, it's always useful to see where the patterns are, and this helps us to think what we want to focus on as a group within the Technology Task Force. So you can see within this one, something like workplace adjustments is consistently scoring higher and has done so for many years. basically, I think organizations focus on this, and it's obviously a really good place to start with to make sure you're focusing on that. But areas like accessibility know-how, so giving your staff the right training, things like life cycle, procurement has been a long-standing issue. We've now set up a procurement network separately outside of technology. So these are areas we know organizations are generally finding a little bit more of a challenge. So this was a quote I got after doing the AMM this year. So it was so helpful to revisit it. We've scheduled to do it again in 6 months' time to help us keep on track and revisiting it. And I'm going to bring Sarah in from NatWest here. So rather than me telling you why this is important, Sarah, I was going to ask you to share why you find it useful and why it's important to NatWest.
Thank you very much, Lucy, and hello everyone. So really useful for NatWest. Year upon year we do this to drive out, and what it does for us is it gives us some tangible actions that we can take to improve our position. So what we tend to do is go through those bullet points under each thing, and we highlight in green the ones we're doing and we highlight in red the ones that we're not. But what it gives us is then, well, what do we need to do to turn that red into a green? So those tangible actions start to come out with a bit of a plan of then how we move up from one level to another. Also really great from a communication tool because it gives you that sort of common language that everyone can talk. So we get together with the key stakeholders across the business that have a stake in this, I suppose, and can drive forward those actions. And then we do it together. And therefore you've got that common language that you can talk to one another about. You agree where you're at, and then you agree what you need to do to move forward. And then it gives you a sort of little roadmap and a plan. And also then we prioritize it as well. So sometimes it may not be the right thing for the business, the right appetite to do everything and go up a significant amount of levels in one big bang. It might be that we prioritize some things over another for that customer impact or that employee impact. So that's how we tend to use it. And also, as Lucy says, with those average scores, it gives us an opportunity to benchmark. We're always asked that question. So how do we compare with others? How are we doing with others against this? And then what we can do is say, well, we can't tell you how we're comparing against X company, but what we can do is as an average of these companies, this is where we compare to them. So most people are here and we would like to be here. And how do we get there from one bit to another? But hopefully that sort of explains how we use it on a practical level, and I would advocate it's a really useful practical tool and enables great communication and that collaboration to improve and mature.
That's great. Thanks ever so much for sharing that, Sarah. So how does it help? To make this work, your organisation needs to commit from the top down and across. As I say, it doesn't just sit within the tech department. Tech doesn't fit in a neat little box, I don't think, anymore. The 1980s are gone, apparently. Until you assess where you are, how do you know where you need to improve? Quite often people will do this, and it's maybe not the areas they thought that they were finding a challenge. It might be something else. It's nice and quantifiable. Accessibility doesn't tend to happen by mistake. So unless you're actively looking at this, you're probably not doing the right thing. So it gives you a really good framework. The tools are there, you just need to use them. Things like the maturity model, there's a lot of free stuff around accessibility. It's a very supportive community. So, go and have a look and see what you can find, or reach out to us and we can help you signpost you. We've got a lot of free resources within the Knowledge Hub. And do it one step at a time, which I think is really important. If you try and tackle it all, it's going to be a real challenge. So focus on what you want to do. Again, Sarah touched on this as well, and then keep doing it. It's not a one time and done. It's a building it into your business as usual. So I'm going to hand over to Kathy and Denise, and Sarah as well. So one of the areas we talked about where we found we were struggling a little more was around accessibility training. And so we decided to create a resource for that. So I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks, Lucy. So accessibility training, a guide to available resources. So accessibility is about making information, products and systems available for everybody, whether that's writing our emails, managing products, managing projects, designing products and procuring tech. So we all need to think about accessibility. And there's plenty of training available, but knowing what is right for you and your colleagues can be difficult to navigate and find. So the work stream's aim was to look at what training is available and how can we put that together as a one-stop shop one-stop shop guidelines document for people to come and consume from the BDF's website. So how did we do this? So we focused on the how and not the why, and we went through a number of steps and criteria to achieve this. So Lucy, if you can move to the next slide. Thank you. So there's lots of training available, but what is best? The group was not about rewriting new content, but leveraging and collating existing content. And then we found what we found useful as subject matter experts from the workstream group, whilst upskilling ourselves and our colleagues. So those three elements together is that members of the workstream have upskilled themselves to become SMEs in their digital accessibility areas. So we utilised our collective experience to compile a list of training that we had all found useful and had recommended internally to our colleagues at work and had kept going back to and to reuse. And we agreed on what constituted good quality and informative training. So there was a lot of resources available. So essentially, we wanted that one-stop shop for everybody just to come to help people get started and keep coming back to consume. We then looked at how to identify our audience, creating high-level role descriptions based upon relevant skill sets, and we matched these levels of competencies against the accessibility proficiency that those roles would need. And this was based upon the industry standard roles, but with no rigid guardrails. So the group decided that individuals can consume as much or as little of this training as they wish, but it's available to all to consume. The essential part of the end of putting the toolkit together in that website feel that Kathy will go through in a moment was that the tool itself went through accessibility and usability testing. So as a work stream, we tested that ourselves using testing tools and manual accessibility testing. And we also then took the guide to our technology task force members for them to review and test it prior to go live. And Kathy is going to run you through what the toolkit looks like.
Kathy, you're on mute, I'm afraid. You've done it.
Just wanted to make sure everybody was still listening and
Paying attention. Yeah, we can hear you
exactly.
now.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kathy.
Yeah, so it is a website toolkit on the BDF site, which is available to everybody. It's a freely available resource, as Lucy said earlier. Do you want to just bring up the next screen, Lucy, because this gives a view of what the toolkit looks like. So nice and easy to find. As Denise says, we've done some testing to make sure that it is accessible. So come on to the next slide, please, Lucy. And as we say, we've structured it based on 4 skill levels. So there was a basic level, which was getting started, the learning more, the advanced and specialist. Now, the idea was not that you started from getting started and moved through the criterias, but you go through the levels depending on what it is you need. Most people will start from getting started, learning more, but then advanced and specialist would be more around the kind of roles that you are may be doing. Next slide, please, Lucy. So here we go. As you can see, sit up in this way, the introduction, basis around it, then the getting started, the learning more, the advanced and the specialist. So this is where you can really delve deep into the training material that's been curated. All of this material is split depending on whether it's paid or free and the different learning styles. So you'll be able to go in there and be able to see things such as webinars or more formal training certificates. Here we go. So you can see as we split it out, you can see whether it's a free or a paid for course, whether it's a video or whether it's a website. And some blogs there as well, so to hopefully to cover all different learning styles. As I said before, getting started is applicable to everybody in your organisation. It's kind of like the fundamentals, the real basic information that we believe everybody in the organisation should have in their getting accessibility journey. So yeah, so that was a quick whistle stop tour of the site. I suppose my question for Sarah would be, how were you planning on using this within NatWest, Sarah?
Thank you, Kathy. So I think a key thing for the organisation, the size of NatWest, is the different levels of understanding on this subject. So from the novice, what are you talking about? What is digital accessibility? To the tester who has a huge amount of knowledge, or maybe someone who's developing the mobile app, which is growing in their knowledge as well. And so what I love about this resource, I wanted to say was that ease of actually being able to dip into it, whoever you are, with all that different level of experience and understanding, and it's got something for everybody. So far I have linked to the resource on our internal intranet site, and that itself, that internal intranet site, is going to get some publication and some communication, so great to be able to signpost such an amazing resource. And also we're incredibly lucky because one of our key like focus areas as a bank is learning. So this nicely ties into, as we're becoming more mature in our digital accessibility journey, how do we help our colleagues help themselves? And it's like, well, actually it's to do with capability, and let's lean into this learning. So from this, our perspective, it's brilliant timing, and I'm great to be able to advertise such a brilliant resource that's been pulled together from a variety of different expertise across different industries, really. So and it goes all the way from the signposting the apprentice scheme as well. So it's not just webinars and training, it's also got the signposting apprentice scheme as well, where you can get some actual skills and qualifications for this, which is great. So yeah, I love it. So really good.
Lovely, thank you for that. I was going to say, if anyone who's tuned into this webinar has got any questions they'd like us to answer, please do put those in the Q&A, and we'll try and get to those next, which would be fantastic. Should have said that at the beginning, but forgot. We do have a question in here as well. I almost need to put my reading glasses on. Yeah, I'm at that age. So is there a list of assistive technologies that are supportive to GDPR, CE, ISO 27001 environments? So the majority we've seen so far are SaaS, so SaaS based, which are hosted in the US. We've compiled a list of our own. However, if you can advise of any you know, that would be great. So I think sometimes this is around the security issues with storing data, I'm thinking. And I know that sometimes that can be, if things are stored outside of the, or am I getting the wrong end of the stick there? Has anyone got anyone think they want to stick? We've got a bit techie now, haven't we? Yeah, that's correct. I know that quite often for captioning, people need stuff on servers in the UK, especially with AI stuff. And I know that we use a number of different companies who can do that. Quite often, organisations who design and develop that assistive technology will have the answers for you. So it'd be quite specific to each one. So I know we've had queries around the use of TextHub, and they publish information around that. Darren, you've unmuted yourself, so I see that as a sign. Did you want to come in on this one?
It is quite technical, and in terms of, I certainly don't know the whole list of them. I think it's a good question, and maybe it's a good one, you know, for the tech task force to combine minds around what we know already. I suppose in my company we do have to go through a third-party risk management with any kind of software, right? So as you said, we'd have to contact them, and perhaps even if it did state some things on their own websites, you'd have to run through a level of due diligence to make sure that you were happy with it as a company anyway.
Yeah. And again, Martin, thank you for putting in the chat about Grammarly as a good example where they hold the data in the US. I know for many of our organisations, if they're financial services or banks, they have their limitations of how they can deal with that stuff. So I know it is, yes, by all means, ask them, but you need to do, as Darren said, your own due diligence in terms of what you need and what you require. Yeah,
Lucy,
Denise.
I was going to add some flavours around what Darren said as well. And if you go back to that particular supplier, they will be able to tell you where their data is held. And some do that combination of European data center sites for the SaaS solution versus for the US in order to get in order to support companies meet their security data needs. So the best conversation, as Darren said, would be having that with the suppliers that you're looking at.
Yeah. So we do have a list of assistive technology. We've got an assistive technology catalogue that you can download. We'll find that and we'll pop that in the chat, or we can send that out later after the webinar. But we don't cover anything around security, and I think that's probably up to organisations. And every organisation is slightly different. You know, some can be quite flexible in terms of what they're able to have, where others can have more restrictions around them. So, but yeah, good question, an interesting one. And we often still get that conversation. Does security trump accessibility? Is it more important? Is it stopping people from accessing stuff? And I think it very much depends on, is the security actually really an issue, or is it just an easy excuse not to provide something? But maybe I'm a little bit cynical about that. I've been doing this job too long, maybe. But if you've got any other questions, do ask us. I think one of the other things I was going to ask is around the maturity model. And again, we've got links to all of that information within the chat, so please do. All the stuff we're talking about today is free, so it's really nice to be able to talk about free stuff you can use and access. The maturity model, I also think there's something around it being developed not by your own organization or by a competitor that gives it its what's the word I'm looking for, its
edge, and it's I know I can't think of it, but it makes you have more faith in it, because actually
it's a bit more credible,
external,
maybe
credible.
because it's so I think that can be really helpful to organizations. And I know organizations who've used it and they've gone, oh, we've scored really badly on this one. Is that a bad thing? And they've gone, no, I'm actually quite pleased because I knew it was rubbish. So I've been able to take that to my senior stakeholders and prove to them through a kind of separate tool and say, look, this is how we're scoring against something. So it can be incredibly helpful for organizations to use it as the stick to raise issues with sort of senior stakeholders on this topic. So and I'm going to pick on Kathy a little bit here as well. Now you're a little newer to using the maturity model, and so you've got that recollection of when you first opened it, and because it does look daunting. I think in a way it's quite inaccessible in terms of how it looks and feels. But can you talk me through how you found it using the model?
So yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was a fabulous resource, right? Because we just didn't have a benchmark. We just did not know where we were. And actually it's so detailed but so clear. So you start off and you go through each one by one, and you start sort of like, and you'd look at the criteria, and each one there's like a statement. So you'd read that statement and you go, are we doing that? Yes, we are. No, we're not. And then you'd move on to the next one. Are we doing that? Yes, we are. No, we're not. And it very quickly pulled out a really great picture of where our hotspots were and our cool spots were, and what are the things that we needed to do to move up. So I loved it because when I came into this, I was, really green and I knew nothing. But what this did was this really gave some tangible, actionable items that we could do to say, yes, if we want to do better at this, these are the things that we need to be doing. And that's what I loved. I thought it was such a great resource.
Fantastic. So I knew I invited you on this webinar for a good reason, Kathy. I was just going to touch a little bit on our other resources we talked about. So we talked about the business case that Darren presented on at the beginning, and just to reiterate, that we've created a number of tools around that, because sometimes we're still having the conversation about why do we need to do this, why is it important, which is why we created that resource. So again, all that information is free, and we've tried to balance out what we felt were the 5 areas that were really important. Sorry, I flicked through the slides in slightly at the wrong tempo. I think Darren and I obviously didn't coordinate that quite well enough, but all of that stuff is available. And what was really nice is when we were pulling together this presentation, we've got a slide deck on there that you could use to present why this is important. We lifted some of those slides from that slide deck with the text that sits within the notes and put it into this presentation. So Darren kind of had the easy job, not like undermining Darren's input to today, because he'd already done the hard work in being part of the work stream that pulled together that information in the first place. So people can lift that, use it within your organization. And if one of those areas doesn't land with your organization, I mean, compliance can be a tricky one. I think sometimes it is the the stick, isn't it? And people don't always like it, and it's been a compliance issue for many years. You can literally just delete bits from it and use it how you see fit. Darren, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because we built in sort of facilitation notes into the slides as well, then, we've used it. I've kind of handed it over to our accessibility champions community, right? And again, even in a company, a global organization, you could have some functions that are more interested in some of those themes than others, like you said, compliance versus innovation, right? And so if they really want to try and get on board some stakeholders, they might tend to focus more on that area. So they've got some slides to get started, and then they might want to build something of their own on top of that. So it's kind of free for people to take that, say, I want to deliver something, or I want to deliver something in 5 or 10 minutes. I think that's why we thought the video was quite nice to do a 3-minute thing. And then if you want to go and learn more, go here. So we wanted to have it for a variety of stakeholders in a variety of situations and for different types of channels and time periods and things like that.
Yeah, and keep it flexible. Now we've got a question. I'm going to go to that, and then I think we'll look to round up because we're getting near time. So they've asked with the maturity model. So with the model, it is so variable across different areas and teams, and at what level. Where do you start? I think this can sometimes be an issue for global companies. Do I just do the UK? Do I do it on a global level? We've got different teams. We've got different parts of the business, and so on. I think you probably need to do what you can do, or I know some have done it. Kathy, you've unmuted yourself. That's fatal. Go on. Did you want to chip in?
I was just going to say, for me, it was just about starting. So and we're exactly the same. So we're a big global company, and it was like exactly as you say. Do we just do the global functions? Do we just do the markets? How do we do it? And it really was just a case of, if we start, then at least we can get a plan to start to do some stuff, and then that snowballs and that starts to go into people. So my advice would be, it doesn't matter. Just start somewhere, and you can then change it and move as you progress.
Yeah,
I did the same.
Yeah, I would echo that. And we started probably within technology division, and then we brought it up bank wide, and it's grown and evolved. But yeah,
that's exactly how we approached it as well. The stakeholders that you have the influence of over, first of all, and the strategy that you can influence and change to start that, show best practice there, and then move it back out into the rest of the corporation.
Sorry, Darren wants to say something, but I'm not going to let him because I'm a bit like that sometimes. We've had one more question come in, so I would quite like to get to it very quickly. Are there any specific guidelines or benchmarks around learning accessibility, e.g. the number of different formats we should be producing at the same content, e.g. e-learning, text, audio? I'm going to signpost to a resource that is available on our new accessibility training resource, which is a resource by Sculpt, Worcestershire County Council. We've done some really good basic training around different areas of things that you need to be thinking about when thinking about accessibility. This is mandatory training they've done to their all their colleagues. But I think you just need to make sure that it works for as wide a range as possible with this one. Darren, did you want to come in on that very quickly, and then we're going to round up?
Yeah, I would try to, where possible, build it all into your package, because I think we have a danger sometimes of saying, here's the one for majority of employees, and here's an accessible version. And we've been on that journey ourselves, and so I think you're right. You do need to have a mixture of content in e-learning anyway to keep it interesting for a start. But I do think that any type of content that you provide needs to be run by people with different disabilities and really test it out like that. So small focus groups to do that is what we've been doing.
Lovely, thank you. We're going to have to round up now. We're at the end of our time. It just leaves me to thank our captioner Jen today, and our 2 BSL interpreters, who will have done well if they've managed to keep up with me. I kept trying to talk slowly, and it's really hard. I also want to thank Darren, Sarah, Denise and Kathy for joining us today, and thank you for your questions and being a part of this. It is recorded and it will be available on our Knowledge Hub afterwards. So thank you everyone ever so much, and take care. Have a good afternoon. Bye bye.